Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and in today's video let's talk a little bit about the correct usage of the electronic checklist system in the Airbus A220. Now this is handled quite differently than it is in any other of the Boeings or Airbuses that you have flown. In a conventional airliner, I'm just gonna call it that way, a checklist is basically done after the pilot has executed the appropriate flow. So you first carry out your items in the cockpit and then you read the checklist in order to confirm that the items have been done. Now, Bombardier, respectively nowadays Airbus on the 220, interpret this a little bit different on the 220. They know two types of checklists, challenge and response, where the challenge is read by the pilot monitoring, and then the pilot flying will confirm the required aircraft configuration or complete the actions where required. And then there is read and do, where the checklist is done as a silent checklist, and the pilot reading the checklist carries out the required action. So that's rather different from what you are knowing from your conventional aircraft. Let's go ahead and have a look into some examples of how that is done. We're sitting cold and dark at the gate and we're about to power the airplane up. So the power on checklist is done as a read and do checklist. So how's that done? Well, we start by turning on the batteries. We don't yet have any checklist since the airplane is cold and dark, so obviously we've got to do that from memory. But once the batteries are on, now we are not going to do anything else, and we are going to wait for the airplane to come alive, and only then we will open the electronic checklist, and then we will carry out the further items. While we're waiting for the airplane to start up, let's quickly go over which checklists are challenge and response and which are read and do. So challenge and response is the pre-flight checklist, before start checklist, before taxi checklist, before takeoff checklist, descent and approach checklist, before landing checklist, and the shutdown checklist. Read and do are the power on checklist, after takeoff checklist, the high altitude climb checklist, the after go around checklist, after landing checks, and the power off checks. Alright, so now our airplane has powered up. So let's go into the checklist and go onto the power on checklist. You can see that the sensed items, so those with a full gray square, are automatically ticked off, while the items where pilot input is needed have a black square. Now, we can see park and brake battery 1 and 2 have been sensed from the aircraft. That means that the system is able to determine its state automatically, but the ECL on display unit number 2 cannot be determined automatically, so we're gonna take that off manually. Next up, we got the hydraulic 3A, 3B, and 2B pumps, and we are going to do all of those one by one. So 2B comes on, then we can go on with the 3A and the 3B pumps. The rest is all sensed, and we do not read a sensed item aloud. And then we got the APU or external power, and now we can turn on the external power. Now we're going to take that off, and that's the power on checklist complete. So that is an example of a read and do checklist. Basically, you tick the items off while you do them. Now let's have a look at an example of a challenge and response checklist, which would be the pre-flight checklist down here. So for this one, the pilot monitoring is going to read the checklist item and the appropriate response, then the pilot flying completes the action while verbalizing the response. So how's that gonna do? Let's say first flight of the day, yes. So the ice detector test is a bad example. So are the circuit breakers or the rudder trim. But let's start with the oxygen mask. So the pilot monitoring would read oxygen masks checked. And the pilot flying checks the mast, response checked, and then the pilot monitoring ticks this off. Then you go on. Pilot monitoring reads airplane documents on board and checked. Pilot flying response on board and checked. Operations engineering bulletins OEB checked. Checked. Emergency equipment checked. Checked. Gear pins on board. On board. And so on and so on and so on. The next item here is one where an action is once again required. So the pilot monitoring It's going to read overhead panel checked, and then we move up to the overhead panel, and we go over the entire panel and carry out any checks that or any drills that may be necessary, such as turning the emergency lights in arm, or such as turning the seatbelt signs on, the logo lights on since it is about to get dark, and then we reply checked. And that way you're going to go over the entire checklists. Now, the checklist system in the A220 is a very intuitive one. You can see it jumps to the next pages where required. When items are not sensed, you tick them off like that. When items are sensed, you don't even have to read them. So the next checklist where we would see that is the before start checklist. So when we go and read the before start checklist, it would go something like this. Departure briefing complete. Complete. APU or external power as required. External power on. Doors. So you can see we skip over the seatbelts. Doors closed and locked. Again, this is not done yet. So we verify that we get the doors closed and locked so that the airplane can sense it, and only then we can continue with the checklist. So now let's go ahead and close that door, and you will see that the moment it is closed, the item is ticked off. Same goes for the beacon. Ticked off. Park and brake as required. Okay, we still want set, so set. Before start checklist complete. And that is how you handle the electronic checklists in the Airbus A220. A system that needs a little bit of getting used to, but once you've done some flights with it, once you see how that stuff handles, it's really getting intuitive, and it is actually a pretty great way to do this stuff without forgetting to do something. Especially when flying, 6 sectors a day. There is one airline doing 8 sectors a day on this airplane, where you basically just do 20-minute hops all the time. And, that's where that type of checklist comes in really handy and really prevents a lot of possible mistakes from happening. Well guys, and that's how you operate the electronic checklist in the Airbus A220. Let me know if you like this system. Let me know if you think that the system that you have, for example, on the 777 or the A350 is a better system, and generally share your opinion in the comments down below. I'd be really interested in hearing your take on this one. Personally, I do like the system from the A220. However, since I've grown up with the systems like they're done on Boeing and Airbus aircraft, I'm completely honest there. I kind of prefer the other ones, but it is a very interesting approach and definitely one that's worth checking out. Now let me know your opinion. Thank you very much for watching. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and then I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.